like to read Theatre of Racial Conflict. Why define specific genre of theatre as black theatre? People often make references to English theatre, French theatre, or German theatre, but never Yoruba theatre, Igbo theatre, Zulu theatre, Ashanti theatre, and Shona theatre. Instead, African theatres are defined as black theatre. Are we subject to an ongoing generalization by colonialists? And to what end? Is black theatre as a term based on generalization? Does the term undermine the understanding of Yoruba, Zulu, Shona, or Ashanti theatre? Are these African theatres all the same? If not, why give them a collective term that diminishes their unique identities? Why are they defined any differently from the way European theatres are defined? If we assume, for the purpose of argument, that they are the same, then we can safely say that German theatre, French theatre, and English theatre are the same as well, and can be termed white theatre, based on the assumption that each one of these theatres does not have inherent and unique cultural characteristics of its own. One of the most reputable journalists in Nigeria, Peter Enahoro, wrote in his book, How to Be a Nigerian, tribes transcend individuality. You would hear one Nigerian describing another Nigerian to a third Nigerian if the third Nigerian is at sea and does not know to whom his informant is referring. The first Nigerian would then bring him ashore with, I am talking about that Yoruba man. In other words, it wouldn't say, I am talking about that black man. Indeed, as would European in similar circumstances. You would say that German man or that Frenchman, and you wouldn't say that white man, because you want to readily identify whom you are referring to. It would seem that the notion of color only arises and all of a sudden becomes important when Africans and people of African descent are in the same space as Europeans and people of European descent. Europeans and people of European descent feel the urgency to define Africans and people of African descent based on their own agenda, whether they are conscious of it or not. Those of us who have assimilated the notion that the so-called black man is inferior to a so-called white man embraced the label with no hesitation and feel powerless to do anything about it. Some are genuinely not aware that the label is actually obsolete and that it only exists as a measure of control over Africans and people of African descent by Europeans. The notion is well articulated in Frank Fanon's book, Black Skin, White Mask. Fanon asks, what does a black man want? Judging from the contents of Fanon's book and the title of the book, it was really suggesting that a so-called black man wants what a white man wants. In other words, black man is forever living in the shadow of a white man. The label is part of his colonial legacy, and we seem to lack the will to shake it off. The notion of black theatre amounts to nothing more than objectification of Africans and people of African descent theatres and by so doing, making us irrelevant. And it is based on an assumption that by assigning a label to us, we are easy to package, manage, market, manipulate, and control on colonialist terms, or ensure the subjective outlook of colonialism with regard to the inner life of each culture. Alas, we can be whatever they want us to be, as we lose our humanity through such references as black people, black theater, black film, and so on. While our strength and personal growth lies in promoting differences in our theaters, we enabled the colonialists to define our world without any effective resistance and through being indifferent, which in effect has resulted in a series of tragic outcomes, such as voluntarily setting our own agenda through colonialist lenses. Come to think of it, when I was growing up as a child in the historical small town of Ile-Ife in the western region of Nigeria in those days, it was rare to see Europeans. Whereas children gathered and saw a European man, they would shout out, "Oyinbo, Oyinbo." They were not shouting, "Ọkùnrin funfun, ọkùnrin funfun," which translate as white man, making reference to colonialists as Oyinbo was not intended as an offense, but as a recognition of difference. Oyinbo is generally used in Yoruba land to refer to Europeans, but does not refer to them as white men. By so doing, they did not negate their humanity or reduce them to nothingness. I had a parallel experience as an African teenager in the small town of Lowestoft in the northeast of England on a working holiday. A group of English children shouted, "Black man, black man," in a similar fashion, but no distinctive and human term was applied to me, and my individuality as a member of an African race was diminished unintentionally by these innocent children because of their social conditioning. I do not perceive my color as a defining factor in identifying me. So why the obsession with my color? I recalled questioning myself several years later as I engaged more in interracial lived experiences, both in theater and in my day-to-day life. My conclusion from a series of similar observations is whenever Africans or people of African descent come into contact with Europeans or people of European descent, they lose their identity or individuality in the relationship because of the imposition of the generalization black. Sadly enough, we the people of Africa and of African descent have come to adopt, internalize, assimilate, and defend this diminishing label to our detriment in an effort to search for our collective identity, which corrupts and obscures our individual identity that was already endowed and vibrant with the cultural identity inherent in us. Well, there I rest my case. I hope you enjoy that section of the reading. The book explored the notion of black theater in a much more extensive way and I cited some experiences which I had both in England and specifically also in San Francisco when I took a play there called The Island, which is a South African play. So I hope you will take time to find the book. It's all over the online, like Amazon. It's actually also on my website. It's available to order. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for your company.